A society is the culmination of all actions of the people in that society. For this reason, each person's values and beliefs contribute to the overall values and beliefs of that society. What a society stands for is what the majority of the people in that society stand for. A society can hold many values, but core values take precedence. And in the United States, one of the core values is progress. Progress is seen as inherently good because it replaces something old with something new. Never-ending replacement of what is in the pursuit of what could be. The hope being that the progress made will lead to a better society. The logical conclusion being that whatever exists now will not exist in the future, because it will inevitably be replaced. And through this replacement, the society of the future will look unrecognizable to the society of today. Currently, in the United States, there are laws forbidding sexual contact between children and adults. But as with everything else, these laws will eventually be replaced. Interracial marriage was illegal until it was not. Homosexual marriage was illegal until it was not. And with sex between adults and prepubescent children currently being illegal, it is only a matter of time until it is not. It is inevitable that both the political left and right in the United States will come together and unanimously legalize sex with children. Although this idea is currently unthinkable, interracial relationships and homosexuality were also previously unthinkable. But as the society progressed, the laws changed. And as the society continues to progress, the laws will continue to change.
Just after midnight, thousands celebrated what was once just a dream.
Gay couples are tying the knot legally for the first time in Connecticut.
And now in the past week, both Iowa and Vermont.
Cheers in New Hampshire, where same-sex couples celebrated
the first same-sex couple to legally wed in the nation's capital.
And judges across the state will be opening their doors today.
I'm glad that my parents are getting married.
Big wins for same-sex marriage.
Maine, Maryland, and Washington have become the first states to approve same-sex marriage by popular vote.
This is a historic day for Maryland.
The Defense of Marriage Act was struck down and Proposition 8 effectively invalidated, again legalizing same-sex marriage in California.
Rhode Island and Minnesota are the latest states to legalize same-sex marriage.
Same-sex marriages are being recognized in the state of New Jersey.
And Hawaii will become the 16th state.
New Mexico has become the latest state.
A federal judge has struck down Oregon's same-sex marriage ban.
A federal judge in Pennsylvania. And starting today, same-sex couples in Illinois can legally marry.
The United States Supreme Court here in Washington has now decided not to hear appeals on same-sex marriage.
The court's order immediately ends delays on marriage in these states.
More than half of all Americans now live in a state where gay marriage is legal.
A federal judge has struck down North Carolina's gay marriage ban.
We're going to take you to Alaska now.
Now legal in the state of Idaho.
Wyoming is the latest state.
In Montana.
South Carolina.
Same-sex marriage officially became legal in the Sunshine State at midnight.
A full-blown civil rights battle in Alabama.
Now 36 U.S. states and the District of Columbia currently allow gay marriages.
In a landmark decision, the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that states cannot ban same-sex marriages.
Legalized sex with children is not mere speculation, but a foreseen inevitability, because there are currently actions being taken in the society to normalize pedophilia, in the same way that interracial relationships and homosexuality were normalized. The justifications for pedophilia will be different for the left and the right, but they will reach the same conclusions using different methodologies. Currently, the biggest arguments against pedophilia deal with the child's inability to consent to sex. A child is considered too young to consent to sex because they do not know what sex is. And even if they gave consent, that consent is invalid because the child lacks the mental capacity to give informed consent. However, both of these arguments against pedophilia are currently being undermined by the left. To create a culture of consent, The left is now advocating that parents ask their babies for consent before changing their baby's diaper.
How young are some of the children you talk to?
We work from children from 3 years old. We work with parents from birth.
From birth?
Yeah. Just about how to set up a culture of consent in their homes. So I'm going to change your nappy now. Is that okay? Of course, the baby's not going to respond, yes, Mum, that's awesome. I'd love to have my nappy changed. But if you leave a space and wait for body language and wait to make eye contact, then you're letting that child know that their response matters.
So we're going to sit down. We're going to do a story.
People aren't surprised when we say that we're teaching consent in early childhood. People have gone, yeah, that absolutely makes sense because we can teach it simply. The only thing that they want to know is, are we actually teaching about sex at this age? And of course, the answer to that is no.
By operating under the assumption that babies are capable of consenting to non-sexual genital touching, it is only a matter of time until it is assumed that babies are capable of consenting to sexualized genital touching. The left is also in favor of comprehensive sex education starting in elementary school. Some schools already require sex ed starting in kindergarten.
This is instructions for the teacher in the classroom to ask her or his students, how do people express their sexual feelings? Oral sex, masturbation, anal sex, massage, holding hands, touching each other's genitals, saying, I like you.
It is pornography men, especially on the House floor, did not want to look at. We couldn't show this on the television news, but yet we want our 4th grade children to be looking at this book.
The World Health Organization standards for sexuality education in Europe actually suggest that children ages 0 to 4 should be given information about masturbation and given the right to explore their gender identities. For ages 4 to 6, children should be taught about same-sex relationships and respect for different norms regarding sexuality. Some of the objectives of the UNESCO Sexuality Education Guidelines include teaching children at age 9 about sexual stimulation and the definition and function of orgasm, and at age 15, that both men and women can receive sexual pleasure with a partner of the same or opposite sex. An online CSE program for African youth called The World Starts With Me tells children that sexuality includes oral sex and masturbation.
They have elementary students as young as 9 years old. Then they teach them how to wear a condom. And they have this plastic genitalia, and they even have young girls. They're teaching them how to put a condom on a male genitalia and boys how to put a condom on a woman's genitalia without the knowledge and consent of the parents.
With children being acknowledged as capable of giving consent since infancy, and with their full understanding of sex since elementary school, the left will conclude that children meet all the requirements necessary to give informed consent for sex.
Our political objectives include developing a society where children are given a much higher status than today, where they are recognised as individuals in their own right, and this includes recognising their right to certain sexual freedoms. Sex, and it's an obligation on society to see that children are given a far more comprehensive sexual education from a far earlier age.
But in that case, they find it out, they discover this with people of their own age and in their own time, and it is the question of inequality, which I come back to, which I think you haven't answered.
Indeed, by your lights, the relationship is unequal in the same way that a teacher-child relationship is unequal, in the same way that a parent-child relationship is unequal.
The teacher is not exploiting the child's sex.
And nor is a pedophile. Pedophiles do not exploit children. Child
molesters
molesters
using the child's sexuality.
No, pedophiles do not use a child's sexuality. Pedophiles develop a mutual sexuality with the child. It's an entirely reciprocal relationship.
But you can't say that because of this business of immaturity and the inequality of the relationship.
Yes, but the definition of maturity is yours. We don't share it.
Well, what is your definition of maturity in this context? Now, how can a child of 12 make a mature judgment about something like sex for the first time, which it has not the first idea about, and cannot possibly weigh the consequences of it?
You're imputing to a sexual relationship heavy judgmental issues. Which
no, I'm not. I'm talking about the physical and psychical response.
Yes. a child is able to recognize a pleasurable experience. He is able to recognize a pleasing emotional experience. He is able to express consent and to recognize that this is something he wishes to continue. And a responsible, caring pedophile it always refers to the wishes of the child.
While the left will be actively trying to normalize pedophilia, the right's justification for pedophilia will take the form of a loophole in their ideology. As a way to restore the patriarchy and to get women under control, the right will want to establish chattel marriage. Women will be considered property, first of their fathers and then of their husbands. The father would own his daughter until the daughter is married, at which time she would then be owned by her husband. In this situation, the question of whether or not a child can consent to sex is irrelevant, because all of the child's desires are subordinate to whoever owns her. If a father wanted to perform incest with his daughter, the father would consent to sex on behalf of his daughter. In the same way, once the daughter is married, the husband cannot be accused of marital rape, because the husband decides when and where she will have sex. Furthermore, because the right values government non-intervention, the government will have no say in how the child is raised or what happens in the bedroom. So, pedophilia will happen if the parents want it to happen, regardless of what the child wants, and the government will be powerless to stop it.
I want to warn you about this next story because a Northern Virginia candidate running for Congress has some shocking, dangerous, and downright disturbing views about children and women. Nathan Larson is an accountant who lives in Fauquier County.
This is hard to read and certainly hard to hear. He admittedly thinks it's okay for adults to have sex with children. He even wants to make it legal. Northern Virginia Bureau Chief Peggy Fox is in Catlett, Virginia tonight, and she spoke to him.
Normally, we don't give people with abhorrent beliefs a platform in which to share those ideas. But this man is running for Congress, and as much as I personally hate to put this man on TV, we believe it's important for people to know why he's running for Congress. Nathan Larson told me he wants to, quote, restore liberty and make incest legal.
What about sexual relations with your own children?
Like, I would favor like legalizing incest.
Why is that?
Just because personal freedom.
What about the children's rights? Wouldn't that be rape to have sex with a child?
Well, like with girls, I mean, I just believe that it should be for fathers to make those decisions.
And you don't find anything wrong with that?
I mean, it's not for me to intrude on another family and tell them what they should do.
Wouldn't that be really dangerous for children?
I don't see how we know that. Like,
children are human beings, they're not property. What about their protection?
The law doesn't treat them as having the full rights of adults.
Nathan Larson also told me he doesn't think wives should be allowed to accuse their husbands of rape.
Beyond the politics of the right and the left, the cultural framework for pedophilia normalization is already here. Pornography simulating pedophilia is already commonplace. Hentai, which is Japanese cartoon porn, has a popular subgenre called lolicon, which is the cartoon equivalent of child porn. Lolicon is legal in most places because it is just fantasy child pornography. They are only drawings representing children with no real children being involved, and that is why it remains legal. While cartoon porn is able to sexualize children, live-action porn is able to sexualize youth. Pornographers often hire girls who are barely legal, with minimal secondary physical sexual characteristics. For example, women in porn often lack pubic hair, and in nature, the only females who lack pubic hair are prepubescent girls. So, by creating pornography which features women who lack pubic hair, it invokes the fantasy that these women are prepubescent, which contributes to the normalization of pedophilia. A free market capitalist would argue that the existence of this pornography is inherently good, because this pornography only exists due to a market demand for it. Through the forces of supply and demand, people demand simulated child pornography, and the market supplies it. Also, the capitalist operates under the assumption that the freer the market, the freer the people. Therefore, the capitalist would argue that actual child pornography should be made legal, because the supply of child porn should be left up to the free market to decide. If there was no demand, then there would be no production, because it would not be profitable. But if there was a demand, it would exist whether or not it was illegal. Therefore, it should be legal and regulated by the free market. The same would hold true for child prostitution. The capitalist believes that under a free market, economic transactions only occur when it benefits everyone involved. Therefore, the economic transaction of child prostitution benefits everyone involved. The purchaser gets the sex they want, and the prostitute gets the money they want.
Paul says he can get us girls who are even younger than the ones we saw at that brothel in the city. And despite all we've seen, we're stunned at just how young he says they are. 8-year-olds. It's hard to believe. He tells us to come see for ourselves. Along with a human rights investigator, we follow Paul through some alleys into a ramshackle house. We think we've already seen it all, but who could be prepared for this? Girls, some so young it could be in kindergarten, all for sale. Throughout the village, we see the same scene at one brothel after another. Everyone here seems to know a little English. When they talk about sex, they use simple, childlike terms anyone can understand.
Boom, boom, yum, yum.
Yum yum means oral sex. Boom boom means intercourse.
I look, huh?
We meet dozens of children. This girl says she's 9.
Yum, yum. Yum, yum.
Yeah, oh, yum, yum. No, coffee, no.
No, too young.
Yum, yum.
She knows how yum, yum.
She's joined by another who says she's 10. Both say they know how to perform oral sex, and they even tell us how much it will cost.
Oh, you doing over bill 30 and 2 girls?
That's 60 American dollars. The pimp says if 2 girls aren't enough, how about 3?
Tiga, happy, happy, happy New Year. Happy, happy.
How much 3 girls?
Tiga 90.
This girl promises we'll be happy. Our team then leaves, saying we may come back.
Some would argue that child prostitution is immoral, and therefore should be illegal. But the capitalist would argue that it would be immoral if it was illegal. Child prostitution is a victimless crime, because as long as everyone involved consents to the sexual transaction, there is no victim. Already explained, the child is capable of consenting to sex, as the left would have you believe, or the child's caretaker could consent on their behalf, as the right would have you believe, meaning that criminalizing child prostitution would persecute those who want to engage in completely voluntary transactions, violate the bodily autonomy of the child, and interfere with the free market. Also on the subject of the free market, child-shaped sex dolls already exist and are available for purchase. And as technology advances, these child sex dolls will eventually turn into child sex androids, until the point where these child sex androids become indistinguishable from real children. And given the current trajectory of our society, this will be hailed as a great achievement, because pedophiles would be able to fulfill their urges without involving real children. But the existence of these child sex androids will normalize the idea that it is all right for adults to have sex with things that look like children, eventually normalizing the fantasy of adults having sex with actual children. Some would argue that allowing pedophiles to buy child-shaped sex dolls would discourage them from having sex with real children, because they would be able to fulfill their sexual urges with the sex dolls and no longer desire real children. However, I do not think this is a compelling argument. Consider the existence of pornography. Most people use pornography as a way to relieve their sexual urges, but very few people use pornography as a replacement for all sexual contact. People watch porn not because they desire porn. People watch porn because they desire sex. So when the opportunity to have sex becomes available, most people will choose to have sex over continuing to watch porn, because sex is the thing desired, and the porn was used as a temporary substitute. So, when a pedophile has sex with a child-shaped sex doll, they still desire sex with a real child. The sex doll is just a temporary substitute. So when given the opportunity to have sex with a real child or a sex doll, the pedophile would likely choose to have sex with the child, because having sex with a child is their true desire. And as long as pedophiles desire sex with real children, sex dolls can only serve as a temporary substitute and not a solution to pedophilia. As stated previously, progress is one of the core values of the United States. But this is not the only core value. Diversity is another core value, with ethnic diversity of the population being considered a strength. In the past, America was considered a melting pot, meaning that in order to create a homogeneous society, new immigrants were expected to integrate into the existing society. The belief was that by adding new people and new cultures, the society would grow stronger. However, the United States has now progressed away from this melting pot interpretation of diversity. It is no longer acceptable to expect immigrants to integrate into the society, because doing so represents cultural imperialism. Cultural imperialism views cultural integration as inherently oppressive, because for a culture to integrate, that culture must lose some aspects of their cultural identity and adopt new cultural standards, meaning that to expect a minority culture to integrate is to impose a new culture onto them, which is a form of imperialism. And for this reason, immigrants to the United States do not have to change their cultural practices or become integrated.
This is the Cedar Riverside neighborhood of Minneapolis. It's known for the University of Minnesota, phenomenal ethnic food, and the export of American fighters to the terrorist groups ISIS and Al-Shabaab. In fact, it's reported that dozens of young Muslims from this community have gone to fight for these organizations. So we hit the street to find out what is going on. Do you feel more comfortable living under American law, or do you feel more comfortable living under Sharia law?
Sharia law. I'm a Muslim, I prefer Sharia law. Sharia law, yes.
You prefer Sharia law over American law?
Of course, yeah. Of course, yeah.
And do you find most of your friends feel the same way?
Yeah, of course, if you're Muslim, yeah.
If you had a choice, would you rather live here or would you rather live in a Muslim country?
I'd rather live in a Muslim country with my people.
Would you prefer to live in America or prefer to live in Somalia?
For me, I think it's Somalia.
Would you rather live in America or live in Somalia?
I would rather live in Somalia.
I'm not Americanized. I just speak fluent, and you know what I mean. I'm articulate, and I can articulate what I'm trying to say. You know what I mean. That's about it. But other than that, I mean, as far as my culture and my preferences and everything, it's still Somali. You know what I mean.
With the United States accepting immigrants from all around the world, and with them not being expected to integrate, this has allowed the creation of parallel communities within the United States. In these communities, immigrants are allowed to continue to live like they did in their country of origin, without needing to adopt the cultural or legal norms of their host country. With many cultures around the world practicing child marriage, and with immigrants from these cultures entering the United States, these immigrants will continue their cultural practice of child marriage once they are in the United States. To deny them the ability to perform child marriage would deny them the ability to practice their traditional culture. And to deny people the ability to practice their traditional culture is cultural imperialism.
In Nepal, the legal age to marry is 20, but in the United States, children as young as 12 can get married if their parents consent or a judge approves. It's a reality that may come as a surprise to some, but it's no surprise to Frady Reese. Frady is an American who was forced into marriage. She later escaped and now runs a nonprofit dedicated to stopping child marriage. Here's her part of the story. How is it possible that in some states a 12-year-old can get married in the United States?
So here's the shocking thing when we talk about child marriage. Marriage before 18 is legal in all 50 U.S. states. And in 27 states, the law does not even specify a minimum age below which a child cannot marry. That means that the laws in the United States, in more than half of the states in the United States, the laws are less protective of children than a country like Nepal.
So our rules are more lax than Nepal's rules on child marriage?
Correct. And in fact, our laws are more similar to Iran, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, where they don't set a minimum age for marriage. That's in 27 states. And in the other states, there are different levels of protection, but in all of those states, a child or somebody under the age of 18 can marry.
There is a debate about this, Frady. It's not everybody is on board across all of the states about there being a set age of marriage and that age being 18. This is Governor Chris Christie of New Jersey. He has a whole conversation about he believes in protecting young people, but he doesn't believe in there being a set age limit. He says because an exclusion without exemptions would violate the cultures and traditions of some communities in New Jersey based on religious traditions. So he's saying he is actually backing his communities if they feel they have a cultural, traditional, or even religious reason. You would say what to that?
I would say, first of all, give me a second while I vomit into the closest garbage can, because that was disgusting what Governor Christie said there. All right, violate cultural, religious traditions. What is he talking about? I don't know of any religion that requires child marriage, and I have publicly challenged Governor Christie to come forward and tell us which religion in New Jersey or anywhere else requires child marriage, and he has not responded. So Governor Christie, I'll say it again, I don't know which religion you're talking about, and you need to come forward and tell us which religion you've identified that is forcing children into marriage.
Nujud Ali was just an 8-year-old child when her father arranged for her to get married. The man she married was 3 times her age. He was a delivery driver who lived in a distant village. Nujud's father made a deal with his family. Nujud's father was following a very common practice in Yemen. Parents arrange marriages for their children when they're very young.
بس ما فكرت بأنه هذه الطفلة اللي هي نجود بأنه عمر 8 سنوات لما راح يدخل فيها الرجل راح يسبب لها جروح.
أنا فكرت أن أم قالوا لي لم يدخل عليها بشيء إلا بعد مدة طويلة.
عند البلوغ.
عند البلوغ أيوه بعد ما تبلغ بسنة. وما فيها الرجال ما يعني ما بزها ولا احترمها ولا احترمنا.
اعتداء على جنسيا في ليلة الدخلة كان غصب عني، لأنه كنت أنا وأمه وأخته ومرات أخو جالسين، فمرات أخو خرجت بقيت أمه وأخته، فاعتدى علي كان يقول لي ما في الله أن أنتِ الآن كنتي مرتي خلاص.
أمه موجودة كانت لما اعتدى عليك جنسيا؟
أي لأني أمه كانت ماسكاني.
مسكاكي؟
مسكاني هكذا. وأنا طبعا كنت بأنا صحيح بس ما في حد مني يجي يساعدني.
Under Yemeni law, there is no crime of marital rape, and Nujud had no help from her family. They told her she now belonged to her husband and had to face up to her duty.
أنت بذاك الوقت كنت تبكين وتصرخين.
كنت أصرخ على صوتي، كنت أبكي، كنت يعني إنه بترجاهم. بس ما حد شيء، قالوا خلاص أنت الحين مزوجة، من حقك إن أنت تصيحي أو إن أنت ترجعي أي مكان.
الزواج قسمان، القسم الأولاني عقد قران، إجراء عقد القران، هذا شيء، والبناء يعني الدخول على الزوجة هذا موضوع آخر. فأما إجراء العقد فهذا أمر يعني ليس له سن معينة في إجراء العقد. يعقد على حتى يمكن أن يعقد على فتاة عمرها سنة زمان، مش 9 سنين ولا 7 سنين ولا 8 سنين. هذا مجرد عقد إيجاب وقبول بين، بس الولي يكون هنا هو الأب لأنه ولي مجبر فتصير زوجته. لكن هل الفتاة أو البنت محل للدخول أم لا؟ طبعا وكم سن الدخول المناسب؟ هذا يختلف باختلاف البيئات وباختلاف الأعراف عند الناس. ولنا في رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قدوة حسنة حيث عقد على زوجته عائشة وكان سنها 6 سنوات وبنى عليها، يعني دخل عليها صلى الله عليه وسلم 9 سنوات.
يقول 6 سنوات.
لا، عقد عليها وهي 6
وتزوجها.
يعني العقد في 6 والبناء اللي هو الدخول في 9 سنوات. ولنا في رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أسوة حسنة.
With the age of adulthood in the United States being 18, when someone 17 or younger gets married, that marriage is technically a child marriage. However, it is disingenuous to draw no distinction between a 17-year-old getting married and a 9-year-old getting married. A post-pubescent teenager is different than a prepubescent child. So when referring to the topic of child marriage, the discussions should stay focused on marriages involving prepubescent children. The kind of marriages that Islam allows. The kind where adult men justify having sex with 9-year-olds because they want to emulate the Prophet Muhammad. But Islam cannot be criticized for its cultural practice because criticizing Islam constitutes Islamophobia. And Muslims cannot be forced to adopt new cultural standards regarding age of consent because that constitutes cultural imperialism. And for these reasons, Muslims who immigrate to the United States will be allowed to continue their cultural practice of child marriage. The only resistance against child marriage will come from the political left, who will be against child marriage, not because they are against children having sex, but because they consider the institution of marriage as inherently oppressive to women. So they will shift the political conversation from banning child marriages to banning all marriages, which will allow Muslims to continue their cultural practice of having sex with children, just not in the legal structure of a marriage. Because according to the left, marriages are oppressive, but casual sex is liberating.
Subvert it, deny it all you want. Marriage is an institution that has curtailed women's freedom for centuries. But instead of rejecting the patriarchal and outdated tradition, some feminists have decided to reclaim it. We may have progressed since the Industrial Revolution, where Mary Wollstonecraft described marriage as little more than a state of legal prostitution. But let's not kid ourselves. Even today, marriage is not about equality. It's about perpetuating male privilege. Being given away by your father may seem cute and romantic, but it stems from a time when women were seen literally as their fathers and then their husband's property. The majority of brides still opt for a white gown.
Yes, indeed.
But the implication that brides should be virgins is both ludicrous and insulting to women. That a female who has had sex is somehow spoiled goods goes against everything feminists claim to stand for. I know feminists who've taken their husband's name because they say it's easier. Easier than changing your passport, email address, utilities bills and bank account details, I suppose. You're basically being branded, so anyone who sees your name knows immediately who you belong to. Even if a woman does away with all these traditions, accept it. Marriage can never be a feminist act. It has formed the backdrop to women's oppression for centuries, and it continues to do so. And women should stop pretending that marriage is anything other than a tool for their own oppression. Anyway, As the late human rights lawyer Paula Ettelbrick said, marriage is a great institution, if you like living in institutions.
Pedophilia normalization is happening right now through the political, cultural, and economic spheres. And it is only a matter of time before pedophilia becomes as normal and celebrated as homosexuality is today. Pedophilia will be considered just another sexual orientation on the spectrum of sexual orientations, because they will claim that pedophiles are just born that way, and that the love a pedophile experiences towards a child is as valid as any other love, because love is love regardless of age.
What we do know is that nobody chooses their sexual orientation, that people discover what's appealing to them. They don't decide what's appealing to them. What they have more choice or decision about is how they deal with such desires, whether they pursue them or not, or try to inhibit them, or what their attitudes are towards them. Most of the persons that I've worked with who have offended against children, I didn't feel did this with any kind of malicious intent at all. I think some of them didn't see this developing. They were drawn into the relationships in ways they didn't recognize themselves. I saw others who genuinely fell in love with the child. It was really a romantic attachment. I think few of them behave this way simply for sexual activity.
I became sexually active when I was 8. But that was with younger boys. You know, the first boy that I went with was 7. At the time we were best friends. And that went on for 2 years. I didn't have any relationships with an adult until I was 10. How did it go? Well, I knew he was gay. He was one of my karate instructors. And, you know, I just got came on to him, you know. And I knew what I was doing. You know, I was fully aware of what I was doing. You know, but I was very attracted to him at the time.
You felt you had the power in the relationship?
Mm-hmm.
You did?
Yeah, I felt very empowered by the relationship. I felt that I controlled the relationship. You know, which is a good thing for a kid, I think.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that also, you know, tends to dispel the belief that, you know, that adults are always the ones in power in such relationships. You know, I let him around.
The North American Man-Boy Love Association was formed in 1979 as a support group for men who are sexually attracted to boys. Over the years, its membership grew from 24 to 1,500 members.
As far as what actually happened, I thought I was talking him into it, but later I discovered that he enjoyed it a lot more than I expected, because I had been convinced by people that kids that size aren't sexual, and myself, I really didn't have a lot of strong sexual feelings at 10, but this particular person enjoyed this quite a lot, it turned out.
We're happy to be here. We feel that historically we are part of this movement for liberation. If anybody looks at them and looks at us, then they'd have to say, well, it's all part of the rainbow, all part of the possibility of people living peacefully together, and that's what we're looking for. Hold on, folks. You better buckle your seatbelt. If anybody is watching this film and they think to themselves that they have control of things because currently sex is suppressed and held to be dark and dreary and worthy of being suppressed, sorry, your day is over. You might not understand it, but I can tell you it's over, and the signs are present here and now. What's happened is that this sexophobia, this negativity, this hysteria, this witch hunt dealing with young people expressing their sexuality has been tightened down. It has been screwed so tightly that I can tell you something, young people, it's about to break.
It is currently illegal to discriminate based on someone's sexual orientation. So when pedophilia becomes legally classified as a sexual orientation, pedophiles will become a protected class of people under the law. Because bigotry and hatred has no place in this progressive and diverse society. Only a hater would hate someone based on their sexual orientation. And you wouldn't want to be a hater now, would you? This concludes part 1 on my video series documenting the normalization of pedophilia. In the upcoming part 2, I will explore the pedophile mindset and determine whether or not pedophilia is a valid sexual orientation. I am a night without sleep. If you liked this analysis, please share this video, give it a thumbs up, and subscribe.